Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the next episode of the Jason's Take On. My name is Jason Whitehead, coming to you from sunny Washington, D.C., and my co-host Jason Noble over in the U.K. As you know, never sunny in London. Anyway, as you know, we talk about a lot of customer success related issues, and really excited to have you as part of this conversation. So thanks for joining us. So today we're going to be looking at an exciting topic around what is change management and customer success, and how do the two fit together, and why is it so important for customer success professionals to be conversant and focused on change management and helping your customers really adopt new ways of working. So looking forward to this conversation. As you know, we like to start every episode with a bold challenge question, because we want you to go out and be bold in your customer success initiatives. So the question for this week is, what bold actions can you take to get your customers to proactively manage change in their organization to drive adoption success with your products? So give that some thought, and we'll be talking about that as we go through. Okay, so Jason, let's just jump right in here. Why are we even talking about this? Why is this such an important topic?
I love starting off our conversations with these big questions, because the why is really important. And that bold question is probably one of the biggest challenge bold questions that we've done, because it's not an easy one to answer. The why are we talking about this? I think there's a number of key reasons here. One is that a lot of customers and organizations, not just customers, but organizations, don't have anybody that's really leading change as a change in the organization. Often the leadership team, the CEO, is all about driving transformation, but it's never really articulated as a formal change program. And I think the other thing with change management is quite often it isn't seen as a separate discipline and a formal discipline within customers and with organizations. So they don't see it as something else. We don't need a specific team for this. And it is in its own right a separate discipline. You can get certified in it. There are people that have got years of experience in it. So it absolutely is its own thing. And it's just not treated as such. And I think the other thing is that every single software implementation, new service implementation, every single technology product is all about change. So change management is a very, very critical piece for successful software and service implementations. When people purchase the software and services from us, what they're looking to do is to gain some outcomes, and that might be some performance improvements. But what they're really trying to say is the software and services are going to enable them to change how they do their job to get the better result. It's not the software that does this on its own, but rather the change in how work is performed that makes the difference. And it's really fundamental. So change management comes into all of our interactions with software and technology. Most customer success teams and most software companies and service providers don't really think about change. They might have a project team, but that's focused around the implementation piece of it. Change management doesn't come into it. And I think we need to look at it as something very different. Many people lack knowledge and skills around what change management is. And on that, it's also not clear to many people what it actually is. What are the risks associated with it? And how do you go about making a successful change? And I think essentially change is the key to success, but most people don't focus on that change. They focus on product, on service, on technology instead, as we've all naturally fallen into that. You can implement software, but this isn't what it's ultimately about. It is about the change, and the change being successful to ultimately make those customers then successful. I think what we've seen with the recent situations with lockdown and the stay-at-home orders from COVID-19 is that key capability that all organizations need is the ability to pivot and change quickly if they're going to survive and thrive. And it's great to see the number of businesses that have effectively done a digital transformation overnight and responded to COVID-19 and can work remotely, can make sure they're still serving their customers. So you can do it, but it's almost a reactive response. And I think one of the key things is we need to have more investment in change management proactively. Yep. So I'll on a similar vein, Jace, let me ask the question back to you. What is change management then? How do you define what change management actually is?
You know, that's such a great one too, because it means so many different things to so many different people. And whenever I go into a new client, I always ask them, what is success for you? What is change for you? What is adoption? And I get such a wide range of answers. One of the most well-known groups out there, ProSci, they define change management as the discipline that guides how we prepare, equip, and support individuals to successfully adopt change in order to drive organizational success and outcomes. And I think that's really a good starting point right there. And I think a lot of folks think about, technology is about innovation. It's about doing things differently. And this sort of requires how individuals and groups and ultimately organizations change behavior. And so many folks you get excited about like the bells and whistles of a software and flashy screens and great functionality and all that's wonderful. But what they don't focus on as much is how do we actually get people to use this as part of their day-to-day jobs and actually have different behavior as a result of the way they use the technology, not just what the technology can do. And the focus on behavior is key. One of the quotes I heard a long time ago, and I can't remember who said it, is, it's not the software that fails, it's the fleshware. And I think that's so important. Like, okay, how do we make sure that people are really going through this? So when I think about what change management is, it really is getting individuals to change how they do their job on a day-to-day basis. And when you look at getting how hard it is to get an individual to change, think about some aspect of your own life that you've tried to change, whether it's healthy eating habits or exercise or other things that you're trying to change behaviors and stick with them for months or years down the road. Getting one person to change is very hard. Getting all the groups across an organization, getting the entire organization to change, it becomes exponentially harder. And, when you're an individual, you've got a lot of self-control and self-determination. When you're trying to change an entire group, you need a structured approach. You need a methodology to really identify what needs to change. What are the factors or levers that you have that you can use to encourage change? What actions does everyone need to take to drive change in their organization? And then how do you monitor it to see what's working, what's not, and take appropriate action that based on the actual results that you're getting? And that is a job in and of itself. So you need to really, assess the impact of the change and what are the risks of the change, what are the risks if we don't change, figure out what's working, what's not working, and then really put in some rigor and structure and discipline and planning to put in place this processing framework to manage that on an ongoing basis. So it is a lot of work to really make sure that happens, then it happens consistently, and then to make it happen quickly, especially like in the case of a COVID where you've got to really get people to pivot. And many folks on the receiving end of this great effort, they have their own day jobs to do, and they've got a lot to think about, and the uncertainty makes it harder for them to do their job. So you've got to come in through the structured process and put that action plan in front of them. So it is a challenge here, but so that's sort of my view of what change management is. Don't know if you have any other thoughts to that as well.
I think you've covered some really key points there, and I think the thing is, it's not simple to do.
No,
right? And I think one of the key things is only by putting a framework around it do you really set yourself up to be successful with it. And having that focus on it is the key thing. I mean, it is fundamentally difficult. We're trying to get people to change how they behave, what they do, and there's so many different implications.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very complex process.
Yeah. So sort of that is a nice tee up then, Jason. Why is it so hard? What makes it such a challenge?
I think you've covered some really key points in your discussion there about what it is, and I think the complexity of it is one thing. It isn't something that is simple and easy to do, and I think underpinning that, you've got the kind of basis level where people don't like change. People are happy with the status quo. They're comfortable with what they're doing, even though it might not be the right thing, it might not be the best thing. The status quo is easier to do. So there's a level of uncomfortableness with change, and that I think everyone's got different degrees of whether they like change or not. I know I've had conversations with my wife, and she openly admits she doesn't like change, whereas I think I do, but there'll be a level that I do like and a level that I don't like. And I think change also requires a level of personal reflection. And as you said in the point earlier on, Jace, it's initially going to require more work. So you're going to change something that you're quite happy with. It's going to be difficult to make that change. You can see why people are resistant to it to start with. And it can also, the thing is, it can get very personal very quickly. In organizations, you're asking people to learn new ways of working. They might like the old ways of working. The old ways of working may be things that they set up, that they help define, so they've got a personal connection with it. And people who struggle with the change may ultimately lose face. They may fear that they're going to be embarrassed in front of their colleagues if they don't like the change. And not everybody is going to agree with the change. So how do you deal with the differences in what people are perceiving the change to bring to them? There's always going to be winners and losers, people who will gain more from the change in any organization, but how do you position it the right way? And for some changes, we're looking at potentially entire divisions of companies and entire companies or people's roles that will potentially get eliminated as part of the change or not be as critical to the operations of the business. And that can have a massively negative impact on the people that work in those areas, but the people who work with them. So there's so many different dynamics at play here, and it is hard. I mean, this is one of the key things. I think most times you find that changes are not communicated very well, and people are not often told about the change. They aren't aware that there's a change coming. They don't know why we're doing the change. If you look at any software buying cycle, someone's purchased the software, that decision more often than not has been made in isolation. I think we're beginning to see changes now where broader involvement from teams, from businesses, as of understanding value, challenges that are helping that. But it's not the whole team, the whole business is brought into it. And people don't know why we're doing it. What the management exec team are looking to do is they hope that people will change their behavior and be more productive. But what's missing many times is articulating what behaviors are needed to start changing, what behaviors you need to start, what new behaviors are, and if there are any behaviors you need to stop. And I think we often try to sell people on what's in it for me, which doesn't work. You know, it's got to be a what's in it for you approach. And it really, it is, as we said, very complex. There's lots of different dimensions and dynamics to change, but a lot of it comes to communication. I think the more people understand why you're doing a change and the value of it, the easier it becomes. And I don't think change is easy, full stop, but the easier it will become to embed within an organization, which is really important.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about there being comfort in the status quo, even if it's not good for you. And I think that's the case with a lot of folks. And when I'm working with clients, especially early on in an initiative, a lot of time is spent with them just asking probing questions to help them have an aha that the status quo is not good for them, and to really make it more uncomfortable to stick with the status quo and make it easier for them to try something new. And there's a lot of techniques around how you help them identify what's not working and start to feel a bit more pressure around that, and then help them lay out a vision for a better future as well, and show them that yes, it will be a difficult transition, but things will be so much better off afterwards, and get them excited for it. But it's getting them over that comfort of the status quo, and then trying to do that at scale is a real challenge.
You've hit on some really key things there. There are techniques to do this, and those techniques are part of change management, hence why we're doing this. It is right. It can be done, but you need to put the focus and effort on it, which I think is really important. What would you say what are the key things that most people get wrong about change management, Jason? We've talked about the challenges, why it's so hard, but what are some of the key things that people get wrong with it?
Yeah, there's a few things here that stick in my craw around this one. And I think you nailed it early on too, is a lot of people right off, they don't value and prioritize change management. Instead, they focus on the tool and the software and the service. And, when projects run late or budgets are running lean or whatever happens, people instinctively look for what are the first things that we can cut. And change management is always one of the big ones. The software is the software. We have to pay for it. Without that, we have nothing. But then they don't realize that if people don't use the software, the tool, or whatever it may be, you don't have anything either. So they naively try to change their effort or cut their change effort as well. And then another one is that they treat change as a single event. Like we need to get live, and we're going to focus all of our effort on go live, and what happens after that will just naturally happen. And they assume that if we train people and we do some communications, then of course people just naturally adopt the software and naturally adopt new ways of working. And history has shown through this trash heap of failed implementations that that's not the case. What I also realized, because I've studied this in school as well too, of different change methodologies, and so many change techniques that really were not built for the SaaS environment of ongoing constant change. And a lot of them were built for here's what it was like before the merger, here's what's like after the merger, like single point in time events, or here's what it was before this new regulation came in, here's what's like after the new regulation. But with so much SaaS software and agile development, it's really turn in this constant change process, but they're using a single point in time methodology, which doesn't make sense. So I think one of the big things here is treat change as an ongoing process. Organizations, they're constantly changing, staff come in and out, the software is constantly getting updated and new functionality is getting released on regular cycles. Market forces changes, competitors come along, excuse me, new government regulations, changes to your product and service. So if you look at change as a one-time event, you're already behind the curve. And I think similar to that, you need to have a team and a structure in place to constantly monitor behavior and change, measure the impact, and then take action based on that. So, many folks, they'll have people come in and they take what I call the go live and go home approach. So we're live now, we've done our change, now we're done. And we can move on to our next project. But you need to have someone there who's going to keep minding the store. And if you don't have that, you don't have someone who has the skills and the experience and the time available and the responsibility in their role, it's not going to happen. And so sort of to finalize that, I think, for many people talk about OCM, and traditionally it's been called organizational change management, but I think instead it really needs to be called ongoing change management. Yeah. I think that's really a big issue. What about you? What other thoughts do you have?
I think some of the key things here is there's quite often a lot of focus on communications and training, but what's not happening is there are not any organizational adjustments being made to make change effective, or to allow you to create change within the business. So there's too much focus on telling people and not enough of engaging and listening. We don't make changes to roles, responsibility, and authority, and I think that's so key when you're implementing change. And changes are not made to required processes. We don't build in new processes, and quite often they're overlooked. And again, a lot of people see process as it's just something we have to do, or something that we'll get onto it. But quite often it's not done. There's a lot of documentation needed for it, but it is important to make those required process changes. I think also your human resources or people teams are not involved enough to align current and future jobs and job functions with the desired changes. So it's so important to engage those as a key stakeholder and multiple other stakeholders around the business. And I think if your HR function is primarily transactional compliance focused, they're likely not going to be able to help you with all the human elements that need to get adjusted as right of this. So I think there's a lot of evolution with HR functions becoming more people orientated now, and even the change from HR to becoming a people function that we're seeing that's going to help with this. And the other thing is, I think many times the incentives and the rewards in a business are not aligned to the desired change. People may be ultimately demotivated to make that change, and people will not work against their own self-interest for long. So you've got a lot of different dynamics at play here.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm working with customers and doing some training courses, we talk about behavior change and how to do that. And so I always pose the question out there: how do you change someone else's behavior? And then I just let it sit for a second and let people sit and think about it. And some people come up with an answer and they don't. And then, inevitably the answer that I have for that as well, the answer is you don't. You can change your own behavior, or you can change the environment in which they're operating, but only the individuals can control their own behavior. So this idea that you're going to change someone else's behavior on your own is not really the case. You have to look at those other elements of what are the environmental factors that we can change, and then how do you learn about what are the actions and behaviors you're demonstrating that you need to change to either drive their change. And that's hard for a lot of people, and it's hard for a lot of leaders to think about that.
It's only by asking those very thought-provoking questions like that you can start getting that information. That already is a level of engagement that people are not used to.
Absolutely. So Jason, let me ask you then, what should leaders do to drive better change management in their organization?
I'm glad you gave that question to me. It's not an easy one to answer. I think one of the kind of techniques and tricks that we've looked at before, Jace, when you and I have spoken, is that what you can do is, if you add a prefix or another word in front of change management to focus on what it is you're trying to do and why, it's a really clever way of doing it. So for example, is it performance change management? Is it behavioral change management? Or is it technical change management? But that pre-word really gives you that context as to what it is you're doing. And I think if we kind of dive into this, though, do we need to think about it as performance change management to focus on changing the performance of an organization? We want to drive positive performance changes, or we want to flip performance changes that are negative for the organization. So when we talk about change management generally, do we think, is it performance that we're looking at, or is it some other things? I mean, ultimately, it's all going to feed into something to do with business performance. So do we change the whole way we're talking about these conversations at the high level to its performance change management? It just gives that, I think it gives execs and other people that focus on it. Maybe performance is the wrong term. It might mean an individual's performance, which is very different, but it's an organizational. So it might be something like organizational performance change management. But that really helps people see what it is you're doing rather than just be about change management. And I think when you talk about change management, you need to call it change management, call it out for what it is as a leader in a business. You know, we are trying to change the way something is done, be it the way we work, the way we speak to customers, the way we work internally, the way we engage with tools, but actually call it out for what it is. And you do need someone within a business, whether it's the CEO or someone at the exec level, to take ownership and accountability for achieving that desired change. And I think this goes back to kind of the essence of, or the art of project management. You know, who is your exec sponsor, your senior stakeholder that's going to sponsor this change? And that's a key thing to do. I think it is change sponsorship, you know, someone that's going to help you drive that change. I think you've also got to make sure as a business that you're providing the resources and the authority for the people that are working on the change program to enact and enable that change. You know, we've talked through how difficult it is. If you leave it to one person whose job is change manager, it isn't going to work. You've got to give them the remit to do it, hold them to account, give them the authority to do this. And actually some of the changes they'll be talking about are organization wide. They're not just a single person. So they're going to need authority and guidance from the exec team to actually push through these changes. So I think there's a number of key things that the leaders can do. I don't know if there's anything that you'd add further on that, Jason.
Yeah, so actually, I had a client. We worked with them on a major, multi-year CRM implementation that was meant to be a big transformational driver for their organization. And as a result of that, and they brought us in to help with their adoption program and change program, even before they selected their technology. I was talking with the CEO the other day. You know, this is a couple of years after the project's ended, and he said, as a result of what he learned from that project, he now requires from his CIO that every new system that they're investing in, that the CIO have an adoption and change plan defined before they write a check, you know, and so they realize it's so important. And as I told him many times, like, you have no business putting money into a technology until you have a plan and resources to figure out how you're going to get your money and value out of it, you know. So such
a good idea. That really is, having that plan behind it, I think, is so important.
Yeah, and you know, he elevated it to the point that he realized that they weren't getting value from a lot, or they're getting subpar value from most of their technology investments. So let's address that issue. And it did a couple of things. It also made them realize that they need to have skills around it in their organization, and that they need to put that responsibility on people's plates. So I think that's
often what you get, that missing skill gap there is the key thing. And how do you address that? You know, this is going to require either bringing someone in that knows how change management works, or skilling people up.
Yeah, and I think as an executive, it's great to require that your people have a plan and that you look it over beforehand, but you also then need to make sure you have expertise to say, is this an adequate plan? I mean, are there gaps in their approach that's going to be a waste of time and money? And a lot of people, you know, it's very hard to spot a gap in a plan if you don't have that deep subject matter expertise. So I think even executives are going to need to learn to say, that may not work for us, so let's adjust our plan. But so anyway, those are just some of the things that come to mind. But I think executives have that starring role to make it a reality.
Absolutely, and this isn't just somebody within an organization trying to do change. It needs to be sponsored and to be led as well by executive. I think so. To bring this full question, there's kind of one more question, or full circle, Jess. One more question I'd throw back to you is what's the role of customer success and of a customer success manager in change management? You know, so for all the guys that we do these podcasts for in the industry of customer success, what's the role that a CSM plays in change management?
I think it's a huge one, and I think over time people are going to realize more and more that that's where their CSMs are struggling and unqualified. You know, I'm one of the co-founders of CS Mastermind. We also have a corresponding program, User Adoption Mastermind, so that customer success professionals and their customers can both learn the same techniques and expertise. And I think one of the important things that we've learned from this is most CS teams They're either already involved in some form of change management, but without really realizing it, but what they really need are those expertise to help their customers drive change in their own organization. And a lot of CSMs right now, they're just not talking enough about with their customers that the success is about getting the customers to drive change and adoption in their own organization. And they need to be more vocal about this. And they need to shift from what are the features and functions of the software to how are you going to achieve your business outcomes by driving change and getting the software used to deliver them. And those are some important conversations that need to happen right up front. But I also find that a lot of CSMs, they need that more detailed training and education around what is change management, what are the processes that our customers should be using, how do I as an external party help my customer identify the need for this and help them identify best practices and gaps that they should be doing in their organization. And I don't think that's happening quite as much as I'd like to see yet. You know, if your customer doesn't have any experience or expertise in change management, they're not likely to get full value from your product and service. So they're going to be a higher churn risk. So right up front, onboarding, even during the sales stage, helping to identify what is our customer's likelihood to be successful, not just with our product, but any product, and then surface that to their attention and bring resources and guidance to them, I think is huge. And when CS teams actually can start to do that, I think they're going to have a huge impact. So I think that needs to be addressed really early with the customers, and it's not right now. You know, I think just a concluding thought, when we think back to why did companies start first investing in customer success teams? Well, it was because their customers weren't very good at getting people to use their product in a way to create value. And it's still that whole user adoption and change where the customers are still struggling. And yet I think a lot of CS teams have moved away a little bit and focused more on training, onboarding, business reviews, but not having that expertise that their customers don't have. And I think that's what they need to bring to the table.
I think one of the key things you've said there is, you know, this is the essence of what we're doing as a CSM is about change and assuming that we want that successful change. And it's another, for me, it's kind of another string to the bow of what customer success is. But you need to give people the right skills and training to be able to do it properly. I think a CSM that understands change management is a really, really strong, well-equipped CSM that can really help the customers. I think it's something that I'm really excited because we're seeing more and more people talking about this, and more CSMs saying, actually, this is something I need to look at and ask the questions about it.
Yeah. And I think you're going to find software buyers over time are going to get more sophisticated in how they evaluate the impact of the customer success services and the strength of the customer success program that each potential vendor is bringing to them. And that's going to be a competitive battleground for the software vendors. And if your CS team doesn't have a proven track record of really helping your customers drive change and achieve outcomes, and another vendor does, who would you go with? I mean, if you're the software buyer, if you can prove the outcomes and how you help us get outcomes we can't achieve on our own, I'm going with you. It's less risk for me. And I think CS teams need to quickly realize, wow, we need to up our game in this area because it's going to be a competitive battleground in the next 5 years.
I think you're so right. And this is one area that I think of a lot of the things that we've spoken about, this is really one exciting area to look at. And the CS teams that are going to be successful are the ones that understand what the challenges here are and really dive in and take it and own it.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
I think on that, you know, this is a great conversation. I think we've kind of covered some topics, but there's still loads of other things for us to talk about, Jason, on this. And I think this is maybe something that we revisit in 6-12 months or something.
Absolutely.
I think just a recap, guys, the question that we asked at the beginning, the bold challenge question, what bold actions can you take to get your customers to proactively manage change in their organizations to drive adoption and success with your product? So please do have a think about that. We'd love to get some feedback from you guys as to what you're doing, how you've done change management in your business. If you haven't, what the challenges have been, and if you've seen success, talk us through what you've done and really share with the community what else you've done there and any learnings you had. But a huge thank you from both of us. It's been a pleasure talking to everyone again, and we're looking forward to seeing everyone again very soon.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Thanks.